Hello, my pod pal, Kate here. Great to be together. In this episode today, we're following up on the topic of seasonal cleansing, but also spring. We're talking about RituCharya today, which is the spring change and how that affects the body and what Ayurveda says about how to maintain and optimize our health during that season. So back in episode 11, it was October, we were talking about the fall change. So don't go anywhere. You don't want to miss this. This is what is happening to bodies as we move from winter into spring. In other news, I would like to let you know, my pod pal, that I am increasing the production schedule of this podcast. So now you will find me releasing Everyday Ayurveda episodes weekly, always to come out on Wednesdays. So stay with me. It's more of the good stuff coming to you.
Welcome to Everyday Ayurveda with Kate, a podcast that translates ancient wisdom for modern lives. I'm your host, Kate O'Donnell. I've been living and teaching Ayurveda, India's traditional medicine, for over 25 years, and I've authored 4 best-selling books on bringing Ayurveda practices into our lives. If you're tired of battling digestive issues, hormonal imbalances, menopause symptoms, or are seeking a deeper spiritual connection and purpose, you're in the right place. This podcast is for you, offering practical, accessible advice to help you heal through diet, optimize your daily routines, and enhance your overall well-being. Follow this space for insights on a diet that heals, strategies for better digestion, sleep, hormone health, and direction for finding a deep sense of meaning and purpose. Join me, my pod people, for this empowering journey into self-care and self-discovery. Together, we'll explore how to bring balance and vitality into your everyday life. Let's do this.
As you've probably heard, Ayurveda has a lot of information in the text about prevention. So it's prevention of disease, prevention of imbalances, prevention of the early signs and symptoms of things just starting to go wrong in the body. And usually the thing that's going wrong in the body has to do with the doshas, your vata, pitta, kapha, which are these elemental compounds that, when they're behaving themselves, do jobs in your body and take care of business. Vata moves things around, pitta breaks things down, and kapha maintains the status quo, holds things together as they are. So all these are wonderful aspects of nature, laws of physics. But the texts do tell us that the doshas and the elements that are in your body and affecting your body from the outside, they undergo changes, especially during the change of seasons. And that's because the elements that are present in, say, winter, where it's very dry and cold, the tissues are rough and hard, that starts to change when we see the melt. So when we're no longer having these freezing temperatures, we are going to have dampness. So it's like how, we get our maple syrup in the spring, right? When we start to have the cold nights and the warm days, and it's like creates this sort of flux in the trees, and the sap is moving again because it's no longer in a frozen state. And it's similar kind of a thing happening in the body. Those of you who do have a colder winter climate that you experience for some part of the year, it's dry. It's the dryness that is there as well that comes along with the cold, especially when you turn on your heaters. And that dry quality, your body creates more mucus, say in the sinuses and in the lungs, for example, to protect them from the dry air. So when the air is no longer so dry, that which was frozen, the molecules of moisture were frozen, now they start to be available and melt, and the snow is melting, and you see those rivers start to rise in the springtime. So we'll start to see just more moisture happening in the climate. Maybe there'll be a rainy season coming for you as well. And what we're looking for is a move from dryness to moisture. That's the main thing we're talking about here. And Ayurveda describes how in the spring, the moisture actually overwhelms the body, actually begins to fill the cavities of the body. The spaces begin to fill up with moisture. and it overflows. And so it's a time of year when, to avoid imbalances of the moisture kind, which will generally have to do with kapha dosha, so that which is kind of sticky, heavy, stagnant, a little bit of a waterlogged feeling. That's what you might feel that in the spring. And the changes that we'll talk about today are the things that you will want to do to change that, to help the body get rid of excess moisture, essentially. That's what spring is about. Keeping in mind that some of you, especially those of you who have dry body type or are in later stages of life where the body naturally becomes more dry, keeping in mind that there are people like you out there who never need to get rid of excess moisture, right? The spring might actually be a fine time of year for you where you get some relief from the dryness of a winter season. So the thing to think about is, okay, the body has like packed on more mucus, potentially more weight as well, more tissue to keep the body warm, protect the body from harsher temperatures. And as spring comes around, that stuff your body wants to break that down and move that out. And nothing wrong with that. So what we'll do, this is laid out in the Ayurveda text. It sort of tells you like what to eat, what to drink, what sort of herbs to use in your water, in your body oil, how you might even anoint yourself differently, like use different scents at this time of year. Your exercise regimen will likely change, your activity levels. So all these things, in order to balance the excess moisture, there's all these things that we can do. And you've probably heard about spring cleansing, right? Whether through a Western modality or an Eastern modality, spring is the time of year where we usually start to talk about a cleanse. And it is when the body is getting rid of the old in order to bring in the new. So when you start to see those little sprouts coming in your yard, in your garden, things start to open up and create new life. Before that happens, there's sort of a getting rid of the old, So like before you plant your new plants in your garden, you go out and you tend the soil. You pull out any junk that's in there, you turn it over, you add more nutrition, and you create the optimal environment for that which you want to grow. And so that's what we're doing, right? This time of year. And so a spring cleanse is a fantastic opportunity. It can look like a lot of different things, ways you could do this, which we will discuss. But ultimately, a cleanse at the change of season is giving your body an opportunity to do what it wants to do anyway. You are essentially just kind of staying out of the way of a natural process that your body is hardwired to do. Your body knows how to get rid of winter excess and get the soil ready for what we're growing in the spring. Your body knows how to get rid of that excess mucus that might start to move around out of the lungs and the sinuses. And your body might start to naturally crave, getting outside more and exercising more. It's like you feel like you're waking up, and actually you are. So all those natural cravings, that you start to say, oh, I'd rather have a lighter meal, or I'd rather have some fruits instead of oatmeal. Like these things all make complete sense, So when we're kind of not aligned with the rhythms of nature, we might continue to choose things that, say, increase moisture in the body or set the stage for stagnation and slowness in the body at a time where the body wants to be doing the opposite. So this wisdom is just an opportunity for us to kind of help the body by rowing the boat along with the stream, with the rhythms of nature, the rhythms of life. And I think you will find that being attuned to the rhythms of life, beyond just your own day-to-day life, but the rhythms of the planet, the plants, the skies, the other creatures that live around us, the movements of the water and the air and budding of the earth, the movements of sap and trees. That's what we want, is to feel connected to that greater sense of life and reality. And that's going to provide sustenance for you spiritually. And so I want to just remind, I think you'll hear me doing this episode after episode in 2025, is remind us that these very practical changes we might make around, say, what we have for breakfast also have a spiritual root and an effect on our spiritual sense of ourselves in the world. And that's my favorite thing about Ayurveda. That is what I love so much about it, is that it's ultimately guiding us into a state of health on a soul level, on a level of feeling connected and empowered and enlightened. So keep that in mind as we dive into conversations about, food and cleanses and all of these very more practical aspects, which are huge. Because if you start making changes, your body starts changing on a cellular level. The amount of moisture is changing in your body because of what you're eating and drinking today. That is going to cause all sorts of tectonic changes in other ways. When you change your body on a cellular level, you are creating an environment for change in the mind and changes of the spirit and the perception of reality. So it's not just the food that's changing. However, let's talk about that, right? So I think, if you think of simply about how spring is a time for, feeling mucusy, the amount of mucus in your stomach is an important topic in Ayurveda, how we look at this change in spring, because the stomach is one of those cavities, right? And it's bigger. Your stomach can hold more than your sinuses and your lungs, but think stomach, sinus, lung. Primarily stomach is a place where that amount of mucus it's moving around from all the tissues in the body. The body starts to kick that stuff out, and it's going to send it to the digestive tract, because that's how we get rid of things primarily, is through poop and pee. Sweat is the other one. So if your body can marshal anything that it doesn't want inside into one of these channels, so we can sweat, we can poop, and we can pee, right? And that's how we're going to get rid of the excesses that are hanging around from the winter. So the stomach is big here, and it's really up to you to know your appetite in the springtime, because when the stomach is having more mucus in it, you're not going to feel as hungry. You are not going to feel that sort of like burn hunger sensation in the same way if you're having excess moisture in the stomach. And now, even though it's spring, and even though texts tell us this is likely, it is not always going to happen, especially to those of you where you're preaching. I'm preaching to the choir, right? Some of you I know already live this stuff and are on your game. So you might not really experience a lot of, say, kapha dosha in the spring. But if you were going to, the first thing you might notice is that your appetite changes. And that's such a huge, aha moment. If you start to feel like, one of the things I hear you say a lot is that your oatmeal starts to feel heavy. You're like, it was great, it was fine. And then come, say, April, I start to feel, I can't, it just sits like a brick in my stomach. And that doesn't mean there's something wrong, with you or your stomach. It just means that your digestion, your digestive fire is changing, and the state of the elements present in your stomach is changing. And that's changing in relation to what is happening in your environment. So that all makes sense. And so you shift to a lighter breakfast. Note to self, however, that those of you who are in sort of a damp and cool spring, it may not be fruit time yet, especially raw fruit, because raw fruit is it's very cold and moist, a lot of it. So you might move towards a hot, savory breakfast, like a broth or vegetable soup kind of a thing, or even something with some lentils in it if you're looking for protein. Egg whites are pretty light. The yolk is very sticky and mucousy. So some of you might find that doesn't digest as well if your stomach feels heavy, but like a warm breakfast, even like a, brown rice kind of a thing with broccoli. So think broths and soups and vegetables and legumes and warm things. If you're in the habit of a hot cereal like oatmeal, just move to a lighter grain. Like quinoa is one that's pretty easy for most to digest across the board. And you could also do buckwheat. Buckwheat is a spring favorite of mine. It's much drier than oatmeal, and you get a nice texture. It will remind you of oatmeal in some ways. It has a really delicious nutty taste. Buy the roasted one. The trade name is kashi with a K. It's much tastier than the unroasted buckwheat. So that's right there, a great change that you can do that will give space to your stomach to sort of do its thing. You might feel like dairy at this time of year starts to feel a little bit heavy, or you notice a little sniffle when you drink milk or you eat cheese or yogurt, cold dairy especially, right? Because think about what happens to mucus when it is cold, right? It gets stickier, so like when you've got a sinus infection, you don't ice your face, you put hot pack on your face and you do steaming, right? And you're trying to take baths and warm things up. We do want to keep the body warm and warm things up in the springtime. It's really important. So you warm the internal environment by eating hot foods instead of raw foods. So it's not like summer yet, right? So we're still eating cooked foods primarily and using warming spices. So ginger is a big one. You could put that in your cereal and your broth. Like a ginger tamari kind of a broth is really fantastic. There's a lot of warmth in things like thyme and oregano as well. So you can enjoy your Western herbs if you have them. Cumin seed, fantastic for warming up the gut, getting rid of mucus, and mustard seeds. There's also sweet things like cinnamon. Cinnamon has an affinity for the lung. It's definitely going to warm things up. So, think about using a little more spice. If you like a chili, you can do a little bit of that. You can do a little like hot stuff if it feels good for you this time of year. But keep in mind, just keeping the food cooked and warm and well spiced will be really helpful right now because mucus doesn't like to be cold. So you can keep the body warm. And another great way to warm things up is to move. So you do want to move more in the spring, right? So if you're feeling the craving to get out there, go for it. However, if your body is being overwhelmed by moisture, it might make you feel kind of like dense and heavy and slow and like you don't want to do anything. That's the time where you want to do something. You want to get moving. So I mentioned sweat, right, as one of those. It's a channel where the body very obviously gets rid of water. So if you do feel a little waterlogged, sweating, this is a great time of year to start working to the point of sweat, So you don't have to like be dripping, but if you can get sort of like beads of sweat forming on the skin, that's great. Of course, you could do that with a sauna. Dry heat is fantastic this time of year for removing that moisture, getting the sweat going on. So those of you who are sauna fans, this is a great thing in the spring, especially. So you're getting a little sweat going on, keeping warm, keeping things moving, being careful about sort of oversleeping in the daytime. Of course, if you're exhausted, you nap, right? But otherwise, you want to kind of stay moving in the daytime. And keep your digestion moving is another one. So, when we start to have that excess moisture, it can provide a clogging kind of a sensation in the gut, in the intestines. Some of you might notice that you become a little less regular. So you might want to actually increase the fiber in your diet, eating more, say, seeds. Seeds are fantastic food this time of year, like hemp and sesame and flax seeds. Flax seeds are really good if you do get sort of constipated. Sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, I toast them in a dry pan and sprinkle them on things. Really fantastic ways to keep kind of a higher fiber in your diet, and also just more cooked vegetables, not necessarily raw yet, but more cooked vegetables. And any vegetables that are green and taste bitter this time of year are also very cleansing. So that's things like broccoli, cauliflower, if you digest it, any kale, chard, all those dark greens. And you might start to see the microgreens coming now, baby kale, sunflower sprouts, things like that are just fantastic to start adding in more of that. And be thinking, about like a higher fiber diet in the springtime. And that should, for most people, digest better than it would in the dead of winter, in that vata season where really fibrous, hard and rough foods might cause just gas and bloating. Now, what we want them to do is really mobilize the gut and start to do a little scrub of the large intestine. And kind of, again, might be excess mucus there as well that wants to move. So higher fiber diet for sure this time of year, and warm foods, also warm water. So warm water, it improves peristalsis, it melts mucus, it's going to keep things in the stomach copacetic, right? It's great for the lung, it's great for the sinus. So keep that thermos around. Don't move into the drinking cold water yet out of a water bottle. I mean, don't ever really drink cold water on the regular, but warm water is good. And you might want to make an herbal water. That's something I talk about a lot in all of my books. And there's all sorts of recipes, but one of our favorite herbs in the spring for really improving circulation and mobilizing that water element is Tulsi. So Tulsi, you can get Tulsi tea bags, probably in your grocery store now. You can get the loose leaf Tulsi, online or at an apothecary, and you just boil some of that into your water. So say you're doing a quart of water, you could use 2 heaping tablespoons of dry Tulsi. Those of you who have access to Tulsi fresh, you could just throw a few sprigs into your water and, have it there throughout the day and get a little bit of the benefits of the Tulsi into your water. But spring is a fantastic time for herbalizing your water or even spicing your water. So if you do feel really mucousy, ginger and cumin together in making tea with ginger and cumin is fantastic for moving that. So if you're getting the spring cold, or you just feel the sniffle, which I certainly notice that when it's rainy weather, I start to feel really heavy and slow, and I'll have a sniffle. And I will start to kind of avoid dairy, yogurt, milk, things like that. I might put a little milk in my tea, but I'm certainly not eating yogurt. Yogurt is very cold and slimy, right? So that kind of thing. A little less of that maybe in the spring. It's a great time of year for more for choosing vegetarian foods more often if you tolerate it well. Again, some of you, especially those in their later years in life, might find that you really don't want to lighten the diet, right? That there are certain things, especially proteins, that you need, that those really grounding foods, so you can keep those going for sure. And so there's all the things you do in your diet, right? Like eating these bitter foods, these greens and lighter grains. And we might have, cooked fruits. Great time of year for cooked fruits. Prunes are fabulous. So if you have access to the prune, soak them or stew them. Great recipes for stewed prunes in a couple of my books. And sometimes I add apricots in there, raisins, cranberries. I put like other things and stew it all together and make stewed fruit with spices. I use ginger and cinnamon. And I eat that as a light breakfast. And I'll follow that, in an hour or 2 with something else. If you want to mix like a compote into your hot cereal, you can mix the stewed fruits or cook them right into your grains. Just if you're finding you're getting really bloated, it's because you're mixing the fruits with the food, and you might want to try having them separately. But there's an astringency going on in things like prunes and pomegranates and berries and all the foods that are sort of purple and red especially. And that astringency really actually tones the tissues, sucks excess water out of the tissues. Think about how grapes are one of the astringent fruits. If you drink red wine, you know how it kind of dries out your mouth. That's the astringency working. So it's tonifying the tissues to eat more of those kinds of foods right now. And of course, if you're increasing your intake of vegetables, cooked veggies, there's astringency in the skins of most vegetables and fruits as well. So cook your vegetables, enjoy some stewed prunes, and that will definitely get things mobilizing in the digestion. So if your gut gets slow, please stew some prunes with ginger and cinnamon and enjoy that as a morning drink or a morning compote. You can blend it and make it into a kind of warm smoothie, which is fun. Those are great additions to the diet, right? And you just sort of, Ayurveda teaches us to sort of shift, the herbs that we might put in our water, how much we're exercising, what we're eating. And then at the juncture of spring and fall, there is talk of a cleanse, a seasonal cleanse. And so, again, the reason we do that is just to stay out of the way of a process that the body is doing naturally. So keep that in mind, that if you're going to undertake a seasonal cleanse, that the goal really is to respect your body's natural inclinations. And so, I think what happens is, as life is going along, we just get into habits. You just get into habits that kind of support you in doing what you have to do in a day to day. But maybe the health of the body is not at the forefront, of the mind. And you want to kind of dial it back. Every 6 months, spring and fall is a really great routine to draw back and, take stock of what's working, what's not working. Have I gotten into any habits or schedules that are, not working for me? We look at things like your sleep. We'll look at your digestion for sure. Like, are you pooping regularly? Is it feeling complete? Is your urine happy? It's not, there's no strange colors or smells. Are you getting a little bit of sweating going on? It's like, I really approach a spring cleanse as a chance to look to change from what was working in winter to what will work in spring, right? And just like you change your clothes, you start wearing different weight clothing as it gets warmer. So the same is happening with your food and your exercise and maybe even your sleep. You might sleep less as it gets brighter out. That's totally natural. So with the cleanse, it's an opportunity, I find, to just look at all the parts, all the composite parts of the life and make some changes. So the way I do it now is, I offer different sort of programs for people to try. But the main thing that I offer, that I have been for decades now, is a khichdi cleanse. And it's just eating mung beans, rice, ghee, and spices, and they're sort of mixed, all cooked together in one pot. You add some vegetables. Very simple stuff, but we're getting that digestive spice. We're getting that warm, light meal. A lot of people report that they really enjoy the spring cleanse because, yes, you're cooking and you're eating your own food, but you're really only cooking once a day and you're just kind of eating the same thing all day, which for a lot of people, it just takes the guesswork out of it. You're just not worried about it. So that's why I personally choose a khichdi cleanse rather than sort of following a more elaborate recipe flow. I just don't want to think too hard about the groceries and the cooking. So I'll just make the same thing every day. I change up the vegetables that I'm using, as the days go by. You want to do, I would say, if you can get 3 days happening, you're doing good. My community cleanse, we go for a 10-day process. So we'll do 3 days to ease into it, where we start to drop some of the like really inflammatory foods like coffee, alcohol, peanut butter. And then we go into eating only khichdi for 5 days. And then we have a sort of exit period where we start to together slowly reintegrate the sort of so-called normal foods, right? Things that aren't khichdi. We start to bring those in. So I feel like cleansing is a skill that you learn and you begin to know, more about your body and how it reacts to cleansing, how it works seasonally. And you can really get to a place where you're really sort of good at it, and you know what you need. And that's part of what I teach is, I teach the community cleanse in such a way that you're learning a health technique. That's something that you can then, how to do it, and you can take it, with you forever and continue to do this thing. So just eating the simple food that's warm and spiced, great. And we might choose more of those bitter and astringent vegetables that we've been talking about. We're not eating meat, we're not eating cheese, we're not drinking, all the things that maybe can cause some imbalances. So what I see is that a lot of people there say they've had some irritable digestion that starts to calm down, people coming off caffeine. Some people choose to do it. Some other people, they just continue to have their cup of coffee throughout the cleanse. When you're ready to take a break from caffeine, it's definitely a good thing to do. A lot of us are operating on unnatural energy levels due to, caffeine abuse. So some people, they come off the caffeine and then they start to like return to their normal energy. What I find is that bodies, they just return to their optimal state when we kind of get out of the way, leave them alone somewhat. So that's what we're doing. So we'll do body therapies in the spring. Some of us will do oil massage. Some of us might use lighter oils this time or a warming oil. And we'll probably exercise more than we would in a fall cleanse. We'll get outside, and move around, take walks more potentially. We might do some like invigorating breath work, things that kind of get energy moving, and we keep the focus, in that way towards like emerging into spring. And it's just a great thing because then when you come out on the other side of this process, the foods that you were eating before, which right now it might seem like really difficult to change, or overwhelming to change. Like, but wait, like I've got my food routine. I'm eating the oatmeal. And if you're eating the oatmeal and it feels great and everything's fantastic, then it's probably working. But if you start to feel like there's some heaviness or some stagnation or some slowness, or your gut's getting stagnant, all of these things start to show up as signs. And then it's a good idea to do a little something to get things moving, a little something special. The cleanse. So we'll do, we make our own green juices going into it. And then you have all those recipes and things that you've gotten used to, these lighter foods, and you come out the other side of the cleanse. The diet that you were eating before is no longer going to feel like the right thing because your body is changed on a cellular level. You've caused changes, over the course of this mono diet for say 3 days, 5 days, however long you choose to do it this year. So you're technically not the same person, which is just fantastic. I love that. You're technically not the same person after a cleanse. And so the foods that you'll eat, that you'll gravitate towards, it'll just be that much easier to sort of move into say a spring diet, where the vegetables you're choosing, you're not choosing as much as say winter squashes. They'll become hard to find, so then you're like, oh, what do I eat? The spring squashes the fall squashes are gone. So what's the spring vegetables? Can we get, the asparagus is here, let's start eating that. So those kind of changes, fantastic, kind of natural stuff. And you'll just find that, for me, I find that doing a cleanse, it just makes all that easier. And I sort of mark it on my calendar. You want to sit down and look at your calendar now. That's why I'm releasing this podcast sort of a little while before spring for many people in the Northern Hemisphere anyway. If you're in the Southern Hemisphere, you can go back to episode 11 and listen to the conversation about the fall RituCharya. So the RituCharya is the seasonal flow, right? So this is spring flow. Episode 11 was the fall flow. And these are such important concepts. We'll always come back to this. We will always come back to this. So one of the questions that you brought to me that I want to address is sort of, when is it not a good time to do a cleanse? Like, what are the signs that I shouldn't do this right now? And that's a great question, a good thing to know. So one of the obvious ones is if you're trying to get pregnant, you are pregnant, or you're breastfeeding. So when you're breastfeeding, you don't want to go into a lighter diet. Right. So a lot of my cleansers, they'll come back a couple years after 2 years or more after their baby is born, in order to give that time. You really want to do very specific rejuvenation after a baby. A cleanse is not that. It's a very different thing. So in other ways that your body might be needing more nourishment to heal. So say you broke some bones, or you're dealing with any kind of like a weakness or something that has weakened you. Like say you had the flu a month ago, then, you're still feeling weak from that. You lost weight, let's say. Like, you don't want to go into a cleanse soon after having like a real illness. You want to have at least a month, maybe more. So a lot of us, I think we tend to think that cleansing is healthy, but according to Ayurveda, it can also be unhealthy if it's done at a time where your body actually needs to be bolstered and nourished. And so that's the postpartum example, post-illness, post-injury, post-surgery, things like that, where you don't want to weaken the body, because a cleanse, it does kind of, weaken the body by giving you a lighter diet. You'll feel stronger in the end, but there's a period of time, especially when your body starts kind of, let's say, moving stuff around. It's almost like a reallocation of resources that might happen in the body, or movement of elements into different places, or moved out of the body, perhaps, like this excess moisture. When that stuff is happening and moving, it's a specific trajectory that your body is on, and it's confusing for your body to be trying to do that at the same time that it's trying to like recover from a flu. So think about that, how cleansing could be not great at those times. Or if, let's say, you have lost weight and can't get it back, kind of thing. I know as we get older, some of us experience that more and more. So if you wanted to, you could do a cleanse, but maybe you'd want to get more guidance on how to do that one-on-one with a practitioner, rather than go into a more generalized program if you're concerned about weight loss. Also, we have to think about the demands and responsibilities that are on you at this time. So the calendar game is a really big part of scheduling a cleanse. So say you're going to do a 3 or a 5 day mono diet, and you're looking at your calendar. So it's like, well, you want to make sure you say that you can rest more while you're doing that. Otherwise, you're giving mixed signals to your body if you're not giving it space. So you need mental space as much as physical space. That's what I think a lot of people don't think about going into it, is that you want to keep your mental space a little more spacious if you can. So taking on less responsibility during the days that you're on a cleanse, having less on your schedule, so you're not trying to do things at night, for example, it's huge to feel like, after you do the dinner thing, you can just relax and get ready for bed, and preferably not working on huge projects. Say you're like doing a PhD and you've been working on huge projects forever, right? It's like me, when I work on a book, it might be going on for 18 months, 2 years. It's not like I'm not going to do my cleanse for 2 years, right? But I might work a little less intensely on that project during that time. And I schedule that in, that I know that I can sort of ratchet down. So that's true of kind of like stress in general. If you can make a little just more space, and even if you can't actually make changes in your schedule, you can also just make changes in how you're approaching each day. So you wake up in the morning and you're like, I'm on a cleanse the next rest of the week. And so I'm going to, any chance I get, I'm going to prioritize, allowing my body to have space. So for instance, there you are, you go to work and you have to poop and you're at your desk. And normally you would just like shove it, hold it in, whatever. But you're like, no, we're going to make sure that we let the body get rid of things right now. So we're going to pee when we have to pee. We're going to poop when we have to poop, right? That right there it's a change, that you can make, even though maybe you still have to go to work and sit at the desk for the same amount of time. So that mental space and that sort of recalibration of your priorities is potentially one of the most important things. And that's why I continue year after year to offer the community cleanse, because it gives people the support to do that, because I think it's hard sometimes when you're in your regular daily life. We might get into habits where we don't prioritize what this body needs very often. And so we come together and support each other in doing that, and knowing that you're not the only person doing that, although you might be the only person in your immediate environment. If you're on a community cleanse, you're part of this group. And so we're all trying to do this thing together. And I have found that helps a lot of people get it off the ground for sure. So don't be cleansing if you're overwhelmed, mentally, emotionally, or physically, and if you are recovering from something. When you get sort of elderly, I think we're going to see less cleansing, let's say, later in life. I talk about this kind of at length in the aging chapter in Everyday Ayurveda for Women's Health, where I describe sort of in that book in general, I go into detail about how Ayurveda talks about the relationship between cleansing and nourishment, where it is said that trying to rejuvenate or deeply nourish a body that has not undergone cleansing is like trying to dye a dirty cloth. So that's to say that if there's dirt, on the cloth, it doesn't absorb the dye. So when we're trying to get you, all the good foods or the herbs or the vitamins and whatever, you want your tissues to be in a place of absorbing that. And that's what cleansing does. It gets your body into a place of, kind of clearing the path and being hungry for absorption of things. And that's why, we do the sort of what I call post cleanse together in the community cleanse, where, the couple days after we eat the khichdi, we're very careful to eat super nourishing foods during those days, right? So you don't want to come out of a cleanse and go right into restaurant food or donut or whatever, because you're probably going to feel hungry at some point pretty soon after doing a cleanse. And so part of the cleanse is we're still on the cleanse, right? Even though we're not just eating khichdi, we're moving into very specific foods that nourish the body, basically whole foods, not processed foods and not chemically based foods, because your tissues will soak that up. Whatever you're eating there, your tissues will soak that up. So that's really important. And one of the places where I think people miss the point a little bit sometimes with a cleanse. So those are the things just to know, right? When to do it, when not to do it. So change of season is when you get the most bang for your buck, for sure. But say you're not ready for that, you still have all the information we talked about today about just changing your diet, eating different foods, cooked vegetables and high fiber and such. So even those things themselves, your body is made to be resilient to these changes, but sometimes we get overwhelmed. The body gets overwhelmed. Just letting that plane go by. Some seasons the body gets overwhelmed, and that's the time where illnesses and imbalances are most likely to enter into the system. And so that's the ultimate reason, or the ultimate wisdom of the seasonal cleanse is keeping the body stronger than the disease. Right? And so during a time of year where there's already a lot for a body to do, that's the time where a pathogen or an imbalance might start to take hold or find its root. And so doing a cleanse, doing a mono diet, doing some simple changes around those times makes it much less likely that these disease processes and imbalances can get started. So it's very much a prevention routine. I feel great doing it. I'm very happy to share it with people, and I see people get great results. And it also gives you that feeling that you're just taking care of yourself. You're doing you're using this ancient wisdom and following its path, and I think that in itself means a lot. So perhaps I'll see you at the Spring Community Cleanse this year, where we'll learn this skill together. And otherwise, stay tuned for a weekly episode drop of Everyday Ayurveda with Kate. Thanks so much for being here with me today.